welcome back to the Thirsty Souls. God willing, with God's help, Hashem, please help me. I want to get back to normal, consistent Torah learning. I've ordered all the right equipment. Today, we're just going to use what I have, but I want to really take it seriously because I not only love teaching Torah, but I just love learning, and I love to be in a Torah environment. Learning Torah really does so much. First of all, it just feeds our soul. It's called the Thirsty Souls. I should say it quenches our souls. But I find myself feeling kind of empty and lost when I am not learning Torah and not connecting to the Word of God. And today we're going to learn, and I'm really excited. So throughout all of my classes, you guys are going to see in the next, Hashem, help me. I want to be consistent every single week. I want to learn either the Parsha or something important that connects to life, or something happening in the news or something. In most of my classes, the way that I teach, the way that I like to teach is I like to go as deep as humanly possible into the text. What does that actually mean? Tragically, maybe not tragically, but it's sometimes unfortunate that this doesn't just go for Torah learning. This goes for everything in life in general. We can sometimes just see the surface level, understand the surface level, and move on. And when the surface level is not very attractive or appetizing, it doesn't really pull us in, and it's kind of dry. We kind of like, oh, that's not for me. I'll give you an example. A lot of people, so I'll give myself as an example. This will all make sense in a second. Dating, I use this example all the time because I love my husband very much. We're married almost 3 years now. This man I chose to marry, who I give my whole life to, on our first date, I wasn't sure we were going to go on a second date. Just imagine, God willing, this man who I'll be with for the rest of my life, who, God willing, will have children together, who, the center of my existence is my marriage. The soul of my life is my marriage, I should say. But when I first met my husband, and I just saw, it was very surface level. Not that he's not super cute, but surface level, you don't really get to the core of something, the deepest truth of something. So when I first saw my husband, I was like, oh my God, I felt all these weird feelings. I felt really awkward. I wanted to go home. I wasn't comfortable in my dress. I just I couldn't see that this was the man I was going to spend my life with forever. When I first met him, that was because I just had the surface level. I didn't know, I saw what he looked like. I saw what his voice, I heard his voice. I was very surface level with this person, but I wasn't at the deepest, truest core of who he is. That took about 3 months until I understood that, and I'm still learning every single day. But as I got to the deepest core of who Itamar Taktuk is, I started to love that person. The same exact thing goes with the Torah. Well, with everything in life, right? Don't just get stuck on the surface level, go deeper. Today we're going to be talking about, and this is the way that I teach Torah in general, I like to start off with the surface level that maybe is not so appetizing and go deeper and deeper and deeper. So today we're going to be talking about Nida. First of all, this week's Parsha discusses the mitzvah of Nida, which Nida literally means a menstruating woman. Nida is the commandment from God. It's a mitzvah d'oraisa. It's a mitzvah straight from the Torah. D'oraisa means from the Torah, where God tells the Jewish people that married Jewish women need to separate, not just sexually, separate physically, let's say, in every single way, from their husbands when they have their period, which is minimum 5 days. Again, if your period is longer, then, as long as you're bleeding, but minimum 5 days, and then an additional 7 days after that. So there's no touching, no kissing, no hugging. You sleep in separate beds. You can't pass things to each other. We're not really going to talk about halacha here, Jewish law. There are many Jewish laws. There's an entire tractate in the Talmud about this. But we're going to be talking about that today because, first of all, it's in this week's Parsha, but also, as Jewish women, this is this is a core, a foundation in our life. This is kind of our calendar, our cycle, our bodies, and this is a really important point for the deepest understanding of what Nida really is. Nida, so it really runs our life. There's a cycle in everyone's marriage, if you keep this mitzvah, where before you get your period, you can feel that it's coming, and you have to make sure that it's really there. You have to check yourself, and then you have to go to the mikvah. You have to dunk in the mikvah, which is a pool of water, to cleanse yourself or make yourself pure again. And at that time, I didn't mention, by the way, that not only for the first 5 days of bleeding, you can't touch your husband, but for another additional 7. After that, they're called the 7 Sheva Nikios, which are 7 white days. But put that aside for a second. this mitzvah, like many other mitzvahs, and like many things in the Torah, it can kind of be like that first date. We see it, we learn about it, we see it in the text, it doesn't really appeal to us, and we move on. And we don't go super deep into the mitzvah. If I stopped dating my husband on the first, God forbid, on the first date, I would never have married him because, you know, if I was impatient, you got to just keep going. And when you really like discover Torah and it just comes, the Torah, it comes to life, and you have this living, breathing relationship with the creator of the world, with God. And it's really beautiful. So we're going to do that today. So first of all, we said it's a mitzvah d'oraisa, it's straight from the Torah. So there are 3 places in the Torah where it talks about the mitzvah of Nida, which is, again, a Jewish woman separating from her husband for minimum 12 days. The first one is in Vayikra in 15:19. It says, I'm going to read it in English, if a woman has a discharge, her flesh discharging blood, meaning she gets her period, she shall remain in her state of menstrual separation for 7 days, and whoever touches her shall become unclean until evening. The next one is in this week's parsha, Vayikra 18:19. Vayikra is Leviticus. And to a woman during the impurity of her separation, you shall not come near to uncover her nakedness. That's in this week's parsha. And then there's another one, and if you guys have another, I think that these 3 are, that's it. But if you guys have another one that I'm missing, let me know in the comments. In Vayikra 20:18, it says, and a man who lies with a woman who has a flow, and he uncovers her nakedness, he has bared her fountain, and she has uncovered the fountain of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off from the midst of their people. This is a mitzvah of Nida, of a man and a woman who are married, separating for half a month. By the way, it's very hard as a woman who is married and who keeps this mitzvah, and you can talk to anyone else who keeps this mitzvah. It's not easy. Not touching your spouse for half a month, every single month. Pretty sure that's like half your life you're not touching. It's hard, and it's called Mesiras Nefesh, meaning like it's a sacrifice, and it's not easy. And we're going to see why this is important. Now, let's talk about the different levels of understanding this mitzvah. The first one has really no depth, and it's not very true. It's not true at all, but it can feel true to those of people who don't go deeper into this mitzvah. And that first understanding of this mitzvah is that it's completely sexist. And as a staunch feminist, there's a lot of feminists behind me. This is my wall of women. I believe in the not superiority or inferiority of women. I believe in the equality of women, and that we women are absolutely just as capable of everything a man is capable of. Or I shouldn't say everything, maybe not physically, we don't have the same physical strength. I mean mental capabilities. We're different but equal, I should say. And this mitzvah, this commandment gets a really bad rap. I mean, it could be seen as sexist. You know, we're dirty. When you get your period, you're unclean. The blood coming out of you makes you disgusting. You're sinful. You're wrong. Again, when you have your period and your Nida, you can't touch your husband. He really can't touch you. Back in the days when there was a holy temple, you couldn't go into the temple. People couldn't touch you really. You couldn't use your hands to make bread. There's so many laws. And you can feel like an outcast. You are cut off from everyone, and you are dirty. Now, think about the text, right? It says, like, and a woman who has her period, you shall not come near to her. That's not such a nice thing to read. And I love God, and I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I'll admit it to you, it doesn't sound so nice. Go deeper. Go deeper. So it can sound like we're inferior, like our periods make us unclean, we're impure, we're not holy during the time of our period. This isn't true, but if you just read the text and you don't go deeper, that's what you're going to get. And I heard this when I was teaching in high school a few different times. And actually, I was just reading an article. I think her name was Rachel Stein. I don't want to say something. I probably have that wrong. Rachel Adler, I think her name is. Whatever. She was talking about how it's the most sexist thing in Judaism, and women shouldn't. It's so horrible, and women shouldn't abide by this law because it's wrong, and it's misogynistic, and it makes us into these like dirty, horrible, impure creatures that are not holy for 2 weeks out of the month. Not true, but it could be true if you stay there. The next understanding of this mitzvah is, again, this one is a little bit true, but it's not the deepest truth. And if you don't go past this understanding, you're going to get stuck on it. And if I got stuck on this, I probably wouldn't keep this mitzvah. Again, the mitzvah, of course, we do things because God told us to, right? That's like the standard of every mitzvah. God says so do it. But we are humans, and we're intellectual creatures with a heart and a soul and a mind, and it has to mean something to us, or it should mean something to us. In the Talmud, in Maseches Nida, which is a tractate discussing ritual impurity because of a woman's menstrual cycle. On page 31b, it says, it is taught, Rabbi Meir would say, for what reason does the Torah say that a menstruating woman is prohibited to her husband? So the Talmud asks this question. So that when she becomes pure again, she will be dear to him, to her husband, like she was dear to him on the day of their wedding. Meaning, mystery, or I should say distance, makes the heart grow fonder. I don't love this explanation because you don't want to think of yourself in your marriage as an entertainer. What the Talmud is trying to say here is that if you are together all the time, your husband can get really bored. It's boring. If you have access to someone all the time, you're going to lose that mystery. You're going to lose that excitement. So when you're off limits to your husband for 2 weeks out of the month, you're going to be as dear to him as you were on your wedding day. Do I like this explanation? No. Is it a little bit true that there is some excitement? Absolutely. Again, these sexist undertones, sorry, Talmud, it's not my vibe. I don't like it. And that's why you have to go deeper into this mitzvah. There must be something more. Again, there's something about this that is true, but it's not the ultimate absolute truth. Don't settle for sub-truths, for half-truths, for a little bit of truth. Keep going. Keep going. So is it true that it makes marriage exciting? And after you haven't touched your spouse in 2 weeks, you really can't wait to get back home after you dunk in the mikvah? It's absolutely true. Is it the absolute whole truth? No, it's a little bit true. And this feeling of like, oh, I'm not so exciting for my husband, I can't be too available. It makes you feel like you're an entertainer. I'm not performing for my husband. That's not why I'm doing this mitzvah, so that my husband doesn't lose attraction for me. That's not why we're doing it. Let's go to the next level. And this is also true, but not the whole truth. The next level is that we keep this mitzvah not because we're dirty and our period, the blood of our menstrual cycle is disgusting and it's impure and unholy, so you have to separate from everything holy. It's not true. It's because in Judaism, the essence of holiness of Judaism is life. God asks us over and over again to choose life. Ubacharta b'chaim. Choose life. God can be found wherever there is life. Wherever there is life, that's where you can find holiness. What's the opposite of life? Death. And the opposite of holiness is death. Of course, God can be found everywhere, but God's presence, His Shekhinah, is absent where there is death. For example, women are not the only people in life who can become impure. Men can also become impure. Izav is a man who has seminal discharge that's irregular, and he also has to separate from everyone, and he also has to wait 7 days under certain conditions and has to go to a mikvah. A man who has a seminal discharge, why does he have the same consequences for the seminal discharge as a woman who has her period? Both of them have an absence of life. Before I explain that, let's talk about another person who can become impure. The Avi Avos, the grandfather of all impurity, is Tamei Mace, a person who becomes impure because they touched or was near a dead body, even if they're breathing the same air as, well, dead bodies don't breathe air, but if there's a dead body in a tent or under a roof and a person walks in under that roof and breathes in that air, they are Tamei Mace. They have to also go out of the camp and not touch anyone and not do anything and wait 7 days or maybe even more sometimes and go to the mikvah because of death. Death is the opposite of life, and life is godliness. Life, everything holy, has life infused into it. So when there's the opposite of life, you have to abstain. You have to abstain from holy things because there is death involved. So how does this connect to Nida? Well, when you have your period, and how does this also connect to a zav, a man with a seminal discharge, meaning I think it's ejaculation, but it's irregular. Both of these people had a potential for life, right? When a woman gets her period, well, before a woman gets her period, she has the ability to get pregnant, to give forth life, to create life. When you get your period and blood comes out of you, that's an egg that wasn't fertilized. And so your uterine lining sheds and that life passed through you and it wasn't taken advantage of. So there's a vestige of death almost in your vicinity. A man who has a seminal discharge, that semen could have impregnated a woman. And that's pure holiness because life in Judaism is holiness. And wherever there's life, God can be found. And wherever there's the opposite of life, even if it's not necessarily death, but it's the potential of life that wasn't taken advantage of, that wasn't used you have to refrain from holiness. So why do women go away, abstain from holy things? Meaning if there was a Beis HaMikdash now, if someone had her period, if a woman had her period, she wouldn't be able to go to the holy temple. Why? Because there is a trace of death within her. And the opposite of life is, oops, 1 second. Whoops, sorry. Someone just called me. The opposite of life is death, and life is holiness, and the opposite of that is the absence of God's presence. So that's another explanation. Now let's go to the deepest explanation. Women, and this is really beautiful, women are, women, wherever they go, they create depth, not death, depth, D-E-P-T-H, depth. They create depth, and anything a woman touches, anything she goes near, a woman brings depth with her. We are so dynamic. Our inner world is so complicated. In Judaism, men are like the sun and women are like the moon. The sun does the same thing every single day. It always looks exactly the same. It always comes up usually around the same time. It goes down usually around the same time, besides when we change the clocks. And it's steady and it's stable and it's reliable, and you can always know that the sun is going to be the same tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. The moon, so that's men. We'll talk about that in a minute. The moon is the opposite. It waxes and it wanes, and sometimes it comes full force and it's this full bright orb that is glowing in the heavens and the skies. And sometimes it's this little sliver and you can hardly see it and it's disappearing. And sometimes you can hardly see it at all and it's gone. Women are like the moon, men are like the sun. Men, we're going to generalize big time here, are really steady and stable. They're not incredibly emotional. They are usually baseline. They have a baseline, they usually stay there. Unless something happens and they get angry or upset or hurt. Men usually, for the most part, they will come home at the same exact time. Your husband, again, generalizing here, without a woman, marriage by a man's perspective, would usually stay the same all the time. You know all those sexist jokes about how women are like, oh, the wives are always angry and hurt, and like, you didn't come home on time, you said you'd be home. I don't like those jokes. It's not nice. And actually, it's true, they put a sexist spin on it, but it's true that we women usually find fault first because we are the ones that are dynamic creatures that can see when something is wrong maybe a year before our husband does. We can see when there should be more intimacy, more depth, more love, when something's not 100% right, when our husband is holding back, because we are like the moon. We are dynamic. We're constantly changing. We have a million different perspectives. I mean, think about the time as women. Before you get your period, you're miserable, you're in pain, you need everyone to not touch you, get away from you, you don't want the world to see you, you need to disappear, stay in bed and watch a good movie, right? And eat chocolate bars, and you're just feeling like bloated and puffy. I don't feel attractive, I feel like, wah, everyone get away from me. And like in your different phase of your menstrual cycle, after you get your period, you're like the full moon. You can conquer the world. You have unlimited amount of confidence, and like you can conquer everything, everywhere, all the time. We have a million different perspectives. A woman brings depth and a deeper dynamic to her marriage. It's our job as women, not because we asked for it, because we are deep creatures. We are emotionally intelligent. We have intuition. We are intuitive. We can spot a year before our husbands do. We can see that something's not right. If someone is holding back, or there is something that shouldn't be, or there isn't something that should be. We can see that and feel that as these really deep, emotionally aware and intelligent creations, and it's just natural. We're like that. We're ever changing, and because we're always changing, and we're not like the sun, which is always kind of stable and staying where it is, we see things in a way that no one else really can. I mean, like, you guys know what I'm talking about. I have some examples. I'm not going to use them right now. We could do that maybe at a women's class. But now, how does this connect to Nida? By the way, if I think so. Again, maybe husbands are not going to like this, but if it were up to a man, I really believe that marriage would stay like this forever. It would just go on this trajectory forever. Just stay like this. Women, because we're like this, we have ups and downs. We create that same dynamic in our marriage, and we make sure that it flows. I always say that women to a marriage is like wind to a sailboat. It creates direction. We create direction. We make our marriage move. we give it like purpose and direction and flow, and we allow it, we force it to grow. We all know how sometimes we women have to force our marriage to grow. Like, come on. Now, how does this connect to Nida? It connects to Nida because our bodies are in charge of this. It's almost like inborn in our bodies, in our physical bodies. My microphone is in charge of this dynamic, this flow of deepening our relationship without even trying. How? Well, one of the reasons shomanagia, which is not touching a man romantically or really at all before you're married, one of the benefits of that is, I always say, let's go back a second, I always tell girls or women when they're dating, try not to like stay the night at his house in the first 3 or 4 days. By the way, that's asking a lot in these days. Everyone is very sexually expressive and open-minded. And I always say, like, give it some time before you're at his house or sleeping over or like hooking up somewhere. Give it some time, because there's two parts of a relationship. There's like the physical, sexual aspect, and then there's like the emotional, intellectual aspect where you really, it's like deep, and you can understand each other and you get to know each other. My husband and I did not touch once before we were married, not even once. And that's not to be arrogant, but it not only were we following Jewish law, but also as a human being, it helped us to get to know each other and not be blinded by the physical, right? Like, for example, if you get into a fight in marriage, well, actually, I want to talk about that in a second. So let's connect this back to Nida for a minute. The physical aspect of a relationship, sexuality, let's say, is very powerful. And you can usually use a lot of times you can use physical touch to solve issues in your marriage or solve problem solve with physical touch, meaning you're not really taking care of those problems, you're kind of putting a band-aid on it, and it's just going to follow you forever until you take care of it. It's the way that like some people date. They don't even know each other, but because they have such a good physical chemistry, they think they love each other, but they don't really love each other. They're just having great relations. They don't really know each other. There's two aspects of a relationship, and you need to develop both. Your body, literally the female body, as it gets its own period and goes through its menstrual cycle, deepens a relationship by bringing in both parts, both parts of a relationship, the emotional, spiritual, intellectual part, and the physical, sexual part. Meaning, for 2 weeks, you can be physical. And for 2 weeks, you can't use physicality to connect all the time. You have to actually talk. You have to actually problem solve by communicating and spending time together. You can't use your body to always feel good about everything. You can't use your body. You actually have to. You are forced to talk. Your body as a woman is in charge. You are forced to communicate and talk to your husband and not always use your body to problem solve. Because using your body, not just in marriage, in dating, in love, in relationships in general, you get angry at each other and then you just snuggle and hold each other and hold each other's hands and you do other stuff and you just feel better. Nida teaches you, you can't touch right now. As a woman, we are like the moon. We are bringing in depth to this marriage. We cannot always use our bodies to feel better. Sometimes we're going to have to talk about it. We are the wind in this sailboat. We are going to make sure that this relationship grows and has depth and has direction. We cannot stay stagnant forever. Why am I screaming? I'm kidding. Does that make sense, everyone? I don't know if anyone's watching this. Like, I can't tell if you're actually, I can't see you, but I hope it makes sense. So our body is in charge of this because us women, we are so deep. That's why I hate when women are objectified. We're so belittled. Like, we have so much to offer. There's so much inside of us. Why does no one see it? Like, come on, we have so much depth. Don't, minimize me to women to a bikini poster or shot, whatever it is. Our body is in charge of this depth making in our marriage. So when you're Nida, just remember that although it might be hard to not be able to touch, sometimes you can even get closer by using your heart and your mind and your speech, verbal communication. It's not always physical communication. And God really loves good marriages. God, more than anything, loves peace in the home. He loves when two people love each other so much that they are willing to do everything it takes to understand each other and to really know each other and love each other. And you can't just use your body to do that. You need to use your communicative skills and your heart and your mind and your soul. So those 2 weeks that you can't touch, you can connect in such a deep way that maybe you wouldn't be able to realize if you were always touching. So that is the deepest, or one of the deepest understandings of Nida, that we women are so deep and we are in charge of bringing that depth to the most important part of our lives, which is our relationship. So remember, when you can't touch and you can't connect with your bodies, you can connect with something that's sometimes even more powerful. You can know each other in your heart and your soul and in your words and in your mind. And God gave us this mitzvah as women to fulfill, to deepen our relationships and to know our soulmates to the core. So that is our Chodesh class, everyone. And I'll see you next week. Stay thirsty.